The battlefield was a graveyard of steel and fire. Varric 4, once a thriving colony, was now nothing more than a shattered world of crumbling buildings and burning wreckage. Smoke curled into the sky, blotting out the twin suns, while the scent of scorched earth and blood filled the air. The dead lay in the rubble, their weapons still clutched in lifeless hands. Captain Elias Vance tightened his grip on his plasma rifle as he crouched behind the remains of a fallen mech. His armor was dented, his helmet visor cracked, but his stance remained firm. He was the last man standing from his unit, the only one left to hold the line. Across the battlefield, a towering figure stepped forward. She was Commander Riza Varric, Excelari warlord, and she moved like a storm-given form. Her dark blue exosuit gleamed under the firelit sky, its energy plating humming with power. A massive two-handed war blade rested against her shoulder, its edge still glowing from the heat of battle. She studied Elias with sharp, golden eyes, the eyes of a predator. "Terran soldier," she called, her voice like a thunderclap through the ruined cityscape. "You fight alone. Surrender." Elias exhaled, rolling his stiff shoulders. His body ached from hours of combat, but the fire in his chest refused to burn out. He wiped the blood from his brow and let out a dry chuckle. "I've got a rule," he said. "I don't surrender to anyone taller than me." Riza tilted her head slightly. Then, to his surprise, she smirked. "A foolish rule." Elias shrugged. "Maybe, but it keeps things interesting." Then she moved, faster than a human eye could track. Elias barely had time to throw himself aside as Riza's warblade crashed into the ground where he had been standing, carving a deep, molten trench through the rubble. The force of the impact sent shockwaves rippling outward, knocking debris into the air. Elias rolled, came up on one knee, and fired. His rifle spat out bolts of plasma, each one aimed with precision. But Riza was already in motion, weaving through the shots with effortless speed. She closed the distance in an instant, her blade arcing toward him again. He had no time to think, only to react. With a grunt, Elias ducked under the swing and drove his armored fist into Riza's midsection. The impact sent a sharp jolt up his arm, but she barely staggered. Instead, she grabbed his wrist, twisting it with bone-crushing force. His rifle was ripped from his grasp and sent clattering into the ruins. She drove her knee into his gut. Elias gasped as pain exploded through his ribs, but he refused to fall. Instead, he grabbed Riza's arm and pulled, using her own momentum against her. She stumbled just enough for him to break free. They separated, both breathing heavily. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Riza's golden eyes burned with something new, respect. "You are strong," she admitted. Elias wiped blood from his lip and grinned. "Yeah? You're not bad yourself." Before she could respond, a distant explosion rocked the ground. Both fighters turned, watching as ships descended from the sky, Terran reinforcements and Solari warriors arriving at the same time. The battle wasn't over, but neither of them moved. Elias met Riza's gaze once more, then smirked. "You fought well, but you're not alone in this. The war might not end today, but for the first time, an enemy and a soldier sought each other not as monsters, but as warriors." And that changed everything. The world around them burned, but neither warrior moved. Captain Elias Vance wiped a trickle of blood from his lip, his breathing uneven. His pulse thundered in his ears, but his stance remained steady. Across from him, Commander Riza Varric shifted her grip on her warblade, her golden eyes sharp and unreadable. The battle had raged for hours. Both had landed blows, each testing the other's limits, but neither had fallen. And now, as reinforcements descended from the smoky skies, they both knew their fight was reaching its final moments. Elias exhaled sharply. "Not gonna lie," he muttered, cracking his neck. "I usually don't spend this long trying to kill someone." Riza tilted her head, amused despite the circumstances. "Perhaps you should try harder." Elias smirked. "Lady, if I try any harder, I might break something important." Without warning, she moved. One moment, she was standing still. The next, she lunged forward, her warblade carving through the air with a deadly hum. Elias barely had time to react. He twisted to the side, the blade missing him by inches, but the sheer force of the swing sent a shockwave through the rubble. Before he could regain his footing, Raza was already in motion again. She was relentless, her strikes fast, precise, unstoppable. Elias dodged left, blocked right, barely managing to stay ahead of her assault. He countered when he could, throwing a well-placed punch, a quick kick to unbalance her, but she absorbed every hit, as if pain was nothing more than an inconvenience. Then she caught him off guard. Her warblade feinted high, then dropped low, sweeping his legs out from under him. Elias hit the ground hard, dust and ash rising around him. Before he could move, Raza pressed the glowing edge of her blade to his throat. For the first time, silence stretched between them. Elias let out a breath, staring up at the towering warrior. "So," he said, voice hoarse, "this is the part where you kill me, huh?" Raza didn't answer right away. She stood over him, her golden eyes searching his face. There was something different in her gaze, something that hadn't been there at the start of the fight. Respect. "You are not like the others," she said at last. Elias raised an eyebrow. "That's supposed to be a compliment?" Her warblade remained at his throat, but her grip on it loosened. "Most Terrans fight with fear. You fight with something else." He smirked. "It's called sheer stupidity. Works wonders." Before she could reply, a deep rumble shook the battlefield. In the distance, massive dropships descended, their engines roaring as soldiers poured out, both Terran and Xelari forces, arriving at the same time. Raza's comlink crackled in her ear. "Commander Varric, status report. Do you have the Terran? Finish him now." Elias's own radio buzzed with static. "Captain Vance, did you copy? We got eyes on you. Do you need support?" Neither of them answered. They simply stared at each other, caught in the moment. Then slowly, Raza deactivated her warblade. The glowing energy flickered out, leaving only the cold metal behind. Elias blinked. "Ha!" She stepped back, offering a single nod. "You fought well, Terran." Elias pushed himself up, wincing as he dusted off his armor. "Not bad yourself." The sound of approaching soldiers grew louder. Soon they would be surrounded, either by his own people or by hers. The fight was over, but something else had taken its place. Something neither of them quite understood yet. As Terran soldiers swarmed forward, Elias looked at Raza one last time. His smirk softened. "You're not alone in this," he said quietly. Before she could respond, they were both pulled apart, dragged back into the war they had just stepped out of. And yet, even as she was taken by her own people, Raza found herself replaying his words in her mind. "You're not alone." For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, this war wasn't as simple as she had once believed. And that thought refused to leave her. The cold steel walls of the brig hummed faintly as Commander Raza Varric paced inside her cell, her hands clasped behind her back. The stark white lights above flickered intermittently, casting long shadows across the gray walls. A far cry from the grand chambers she was accustomed to in the Xelari dominion, yet here she was captured, a prisoner of the very species she had once considered beneath her. The hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the floor, and Raza's golden eyes flickered toward the narrow viewport. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, their cold light indifferent to the small drama unfolding within the ship. She was no longer on the battlefield. Now she was surrounded by humans, the enemies she had come to know all too well. Thinking about escape. The voice startled her. She spun, her sharp gaze falling on Captain Elias Vance, who stood just beyond the thick energy field that separated them. He leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed, as if he had all the time in the galaxy. Raza didn't answer immediately. Instead, she straightened, her posture proud, unyielding. "Escape is hardly necessary," she said, her voice smooth, though a hint of bitterness lingered. "I don't need to run from you, Terran. I'll be free soon enough." Elias raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a half-smile. "Right. Any minute now, I'm sure you'll have a fleet of Xelari ships coming to bust you out." Raza's eyes narrowed, but the humor in his voice caught her off guard. She expected nothing but disdain from the humans, yet Elias didn't seem to be in a hurry to hate her. His eyes weren't filled with the typical scorn she had seen from her own people when they thought of humans. Instead, there was something more complicated, a curiosity. "You think your people will save you?" Elias pressed. Or is it more that you're afraid of what might happen if they don't? Riza's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. Elias pushed off the wall and moved closer to the energy barrier, his boots clicking sharply on the metal floor. He was still battered from the battle earlier, his armor dented and scratched. His movements were casual, but Riza could see the tension in his shoulders, the weariness in his eyes. He wasn't a hero, at least not in the traditional sense, but he was relentless. She could sense that much. So, what now? Elias continued, his voice lighter now. We keep you locked up until your people decide whether to make us the enemy or the ally. Riza turned away from him, pacing again. You wouldn't understand. The Xelari honor is absolute, and I am a warrior. To be captured like this is an offense to my people. She paused, her back still turned. But you wouldn't care about honor. It's not something your kind understands. Really? Elias' tone was mocking, but there was an undercurrent of something else, genuine curiosity. Because you and I both know you fought your whole life for something. You got honor? It's just. He paused, choosing his words carefully. It's just different from what you're used to. Riza's back stiffened. What are you saying? He shrugged. I'm saying you don't have to be a prisoner of your own code, not if you don't want to be. For a moment, Riza was silent, processing his words. The air felt charged, the hum of the ship in the background almost drowning out the heavy silence between them. Was he trying to free her, in a way? Or was this just another tactic, a way to manipulate her into breaking? I don't need your freedom, Tyran, Riza said sharply. I need nothing from you. Elias chuckled softly, his gaze never leaving hers. Sure, you say that now. Her eyes flashed with a dangerous spark. I'm not like you. No, he agreed, you're not. But you're still human. You might just not know it yet. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Riza stared at him, her mind racing. There was something about this human, something about his confidence, his resilience, that felt familiar. Something about him that unnerved her. Could he be right? Was it possible that she wasn't as different as she thought? Before she could speak, the sound of boots echoed in the corridor, and two guards appeared, their weapons raised. Captain, you're needed on the bridge. Elias nodded and stepped back from the energy field, but not before shooting Riza one last look, this time more thoughtful than mocking. Guess we'll have to finish this conversation later. Riza remained silent, watching him leave. Her mind buzzed with questions, but she buried them beneath layers of pride and anger. She was a warrior. She didn't need to question. She had no time for weakness. And yet, for the first time since she'd been captured, Riza wasn't so sure. The bridge of the Tyran warship was a cold, sterile place, bathed in the flickering light of screens and flashing command consoles. The hum of the ship's systems was a constant presence, a quiet reminder that they were far from home, floating through the vast emptiness of space. Captain Elias Vance stood at the center, his boots tapping rhythmically against the floor as he scanned the tactical map projected before him. His mind was sharp, calculating, focused on the mission ahead. But in the back of his thoughts, a different battle raged, a battle that had nothing to do with the war. It was the same battle that had started the moment he brought Riza Varric aboard, the same fight that had lingered in the corners of his mind each time he saw her gaze, intense, defiant, but somehow uncertain. The sound of footsteps interrupted his thoughts, and Elias turned to see Lieutenant Tessa Miller, his second-in-command, approach. She held a datapad in one hand, her expression tense. Captain, we've got a situation. Elias raised an eyebrow. What kind of situation? Riza, Tessa said, glancing down at the datapad. She's been acting strange, asking questions about the Xelari's role in the war, why we're fighting, what really started this conflict. Elias frowned. She's a warlord. She's probably just trying to mess with us. Tessa shook her head. No, sir. This isn't the usual deflection. She's probing us for information. He sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. Of course she is. It wasn't just that Riza was dangerous. It was that she was smart, too smart. And now in the quiet hours of their ship's journey, she was starting to question things. Things that made Elias feel uncomfortable. Where is she now? He asked. Her cell. She insists on speaking with you. Elias hesitated. She's a prisoner, not a diplomat. We're not holding tea parties. Tessa's eyes hardened. Maybe you should hear her out, just in case. Elias grunted, glancing at the view outside the bridge's massive window. Stars twinkled, distant and cold. The war had raged for years, with no end in sight, but every time he looked at Reza, something inside him tugged at him, like a thread pulling him towards something he wasn't sure he wanted to understand. Fine, I'll speak with her. He turned toward Tessa. Get me a clear channel to her cell, and make sure there are guards this time. Understood, sir. Minutes later, Elias stood in front of the brig once more, the cold energy barrier separating him from the prisoner inside. Riza sat on the cot, her arms crossed, her eyes locked on the door as if she had been waiting for him. Her posture was stiff, but there was something different in the way she carried herself now. Less imperious, more human. Elias stepped into the room, hands clasped behind his back, his boots echoing off the steel floors. You wanted to talk, he said flatly. Riza raised an eyebrow, but didn't stand. I did, but I don't need an audience. The two guards stationed at the door shifted uncomfortably, but Elias waved them off. It's just me. What's on your mind, Riza? She tilted her head slightly, considering him. You want to know why I've been asking questions. Honestly, I just want to know if you're trying to drive us all insane. A small, reluctant smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Not quite, but I have been thinking about the war, about our purpose. You think we're monsters, you Terrans, but maybe you don't understand the truth any more than we do. Elias studied her closely. And what truth would that be? Her eyes were distant, almost sad, as if she was seeing something beyond the walls of her cell. That this war isn't about what we thought it was. It's not just conquest. It's something deeper. There are forces behind this conflict, manipulating us all. Elias blinked. For the first time, he felt the weight of her words. Are you telling me that your people don't want war? Not all of us. She leaned forward, the chains that bound her wrists rattling softly. But most of us don't have a choice. We're caught in a game we didn't start. We're all pawns, on both sides. Elias was silent for a moment, his mind racing. He had heard rumors, whispers about shady deals and hidden agendas, but hearing it from Riza's mouth, someone who had lived this war firsthand, made it feel real. You think your people are innocent in all of this? Elias asked, his voice barely a whisper. Riza didn't respond immediately. She simply stared at him, her gaze unreadable. Then slowly she shook her head. No, but I don't think we're the only ones to blame. Elias exhaled slowly, his mind spinning. This wasn't the fight he'd expected to have. Not with her, not with anyone. The command center of the Terran warship was a hive of activity. Officers moved swiftly from console to console, monitoring the flow of data, scanning the void for any sign of danger. It was a place where decisions were made in the blink of an eye, where every second mattered. But for Captain Elias Vance, the chaos seemed distant. His thoughts were consumed by something else entirely. He leaned over the central console, staring at the blinking red dots on the map of the galaxy. It had been hours since he spoke to Riza in the brig, and her words had not left him. What if the mission is a lie? Her voice echoed in his mind like a ghost, whispering doubts he hadn't even considered. Elias had always believed in the cause. The Terran coalition fought to protect the weak, to defend their people from the ruthless Isolari war machine. That was the narrative, the truth he had always accepted. But Riza, she had planted a seed. Captain, you're needed. Elias turned, his eyes meeting Lieutenant Tessa Miller's steely gaze. She stood in the doorway, her posture rigid, but there was a flicker of something in her expression. Concern, maybe. What is it? He asked, his voice flat, though his mind was elsewhere. The council wants an update on the prisoner. They're not happy about your extended conversation with her, Tessa said. Elias ran a hand through his hair, his frustration palpable. Let me guess. They think I'm getting soft. They're not wrong, Tessa said with a small shrug. But they also think you might be losing focus, and they're right to be worried. Elias sighed, pushing away from the console. He had no time for politics, not now. Not when his mind was consumed by the fact that the enemy commander, his enemy, was challenging everything he knew about the war. "I'll deal with it," he muttered, turning toward the door. As he walked through the narrow corridors of the ship, Elias' footsteps seemed to echo louder than usual. The weight of the decision he was about to make pressed heavily on him. It was no longer just about winning a battle or defending his people. It was about understanding the larger picture, about uncovering the truth. When he reached the brig, the guards nodded at him, stepping aside as he approached Riza's cell. She was standing near the window, her back to him, looking out at the stars. It was a strange sight. This fierce, untouchable warrior gazing at the vast emptiness of space like someone lost. "Riza," Elias said, his voice carrying through the room. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. There was no defiance in them now, only a quiet strength. "Captain." Elias stepped inside, the door hissing shut behind him. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "I've been thinking about what you said." Her expression softened just a fraction. And you're right," Elias admitted, his voice low. "I've been blind. This war, it's not as clear-cut as we were told. I don't know who's pulling the strings, but it's not just the Solari. We're all being played." Riza nodded, her eyes not leaving his. "The same game, Captain, on both sides." She stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "I would help you, but not for your people, Captain, not for your governments. I would help you because I want answers, because my people are as trapped in this as yours are." Elias studied her, the flickering light of the cell casting long shadows across her face. He was used to seeing Riza as a warrior, as an enemy. But now, for the first time, she was something else, an ally, if only for a moment. "How do I know you're not just playing me?" Elias asked. "You don't," Riza replied. "But you've already made your choice, Captain. You know that deep down." Elias exhaled slowly, his mind racing. This was a gamble. He was about to trust an enemy, a deadly, cunning enemy. But for the first time, it felt like the only option. "All right," he said, his voice hardening. "I'm freeing you, Riza. But this doesn't mean I trust you. I'm giving you one chance to prove that you're on the same side. Help us uncover the truth, and maybe we'll have a chance to stop this war before it tears us all apart." Riza's gaze flickered with something that might have been surprise, but she didn't say a word. She simply nodded, as if she had expected nothing less. Elias motioned to the guards, "Release her." The guards hesitated but followed his order. With a click, the energy barrier faded, and Riza stepped forward, free for the first time since her capture. As she passed Elias, she looked at him, her voice soft but resolute. "Don't mistake my willingness to cooperate for weakness, Captain. This war may end, but the fight between us is far from over." Elias nodded. "We'll see." But deep down, he knew that their paths were no longer just those of enemies. They were walking a line together now, a fragile alliance, one built on the hope that together they could uncover the truth before it was too late. The quiet hum of the Turan warship felt almost unnatural now. After weeks of high-intensity missions, firefights, and constant readiness, the stillness was suffocating, as if the entire ship was holding its breath, waiting for something, anything to happen. Captain Elias Vance stood alone in front of the observation deck's massive viewport, staring out into the expanse of space. The stars stretched endlessly before him, vast and uncaring. Yet his mind was anything but still. The decisions he had made over the past few days, a fragile alliance with Riza, questioning the truth of the war, kept gnawing at him, each one a heavier weight than the last. The Solari commander was no longer confined to her cell. She now roamed the corridors freely, under the watchful eye of his officers. But despite her newfound liberty, Elias felt the tension in the air, her presence, her strength. There was still a distance between them, an unspoken war that neither could ignore. The truce they'd struck was temporary, fragile, but necessary. A sudden footfall broke his reverie. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Captain." The voice was calm, smooth, Riza Varak. She didn't announce herself with the usual arrogance of a prisoner-turned-ally, but with an unexpected quietness, as though she too was aware of the delicate nature of the moment. Elias turned to find her standing a few feet away, her arms crossed over her chest, her gaze sharp yet contemplative. "I've been reviewing the data," Raza said, her voice steady, but with an edge. "And there's something off about the last mission, the one that led us here." Elias raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "There are patterns, subtle ones, but patterns nonetheless," she continued, stepping closer. "Someone on your side, someone high up, is giving orders that don't match up with the mission objectives. They're targeting civilian colonies, places that have nothing to do with the war." Elias felt a sharp pang in his chest. "You're saying someone on my side is sabotaging the mission?" Riza nodded slowly, her golden eyes intense. "Not sabotaging. More like steering things in a direction they shouldn't go, pushing both sides towards something bigger." His mind raced. Sabotage. Espionage. It was the kind of thing that didn't happen often, but when it did, the consequences were catastrophic. "We've been fighting the Xalari for years. Why would someone on our side target civilians?" Riza didn't hesitate. "Because this war isn't about victory. It's about control." She paused, letting the words sink in. "And you're all being led like lambs to the slaughter." Elias' breath caught in his throat. He wanted to deny it, to push her words away as lies, but the cold, unsettling truth in her eyes made it hard to ignore. She wasn't playing him. She was telling him what she knew, whether he wanted to hear it or not. "You're saying this war is being manipulated from the inside," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "By someone on our side." "Yes," she replied, her voice low and quiet, but laced with urgency. "And it's not just your side. There are those pulling strings on both ends, using you as pawns in a game you don't even understand. Both sides are being manipulated. The real enemy is the one who benefits from the conflict continuing." Elias clenched his fists at his sides, anger rising. Who's doing this?" Riza's expression softened, almost regretful. "I don't know yet, but I'm working on it. I just need more time. And more trust." She gave him a pointed look, her meaning clear. "Time that's running out." A silence stretched between them. Elias could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. His instincts screamed at him to dismiss it, to believe the narrative he had fought for all his life. But a nagging suspicion, born from everything Riza had said and everything he had seen, began to gnaw at him. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, finally breaking the silence. "Why would you risk everything to expose this?" Riza took a deep breath, her eyes flickering toward the stars outside. "Because I'm not just fighting for my people anymore. I'm fighting for something greater." She paused, her voice softening. "And because, despite everything, I believe in what you could be, Captain Vance. Not your leaders, not the war, but you." Elias swallowed hard. The tension in the air between them shifted, less antagonistic, more fragile. There was something almost human in her words, something that resonated deep within him. "You don't have to trust me," Riza said, her tone quieter now. "But we need to figure this out, together, before it's too late." Elias looked out into the blackness of space, the stars shining down on him like distant gods, indifferent to the fragile alliance he was forging. His thoughts churned, weighed down by the realization that everything he thought he knew could be a lie. Could he trust her? Could he trust his own side? The air on the Turan warship was heavy with anticipation, the silence before the storm. Captain Elias Vance stood on the bridge, staring at the swirling mass of stars and distant planets on the view screen. He could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on him. His mind was a battlefield, caught between loyalty to his people and the unsettling truth he had begun to uncover. Riza's words, about the war being manipulated, about there being unseen forces behind both sides, lingered in his thoughts. Could it be true? His instincts told him to be cautious, to remain focused on the mission. But there was a part of him that couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. "Captain." Elias turned to find Lieutenant Tessa Miller, his second in command, stepping up beside him. Her face was grim, her posture tight. She held the data pad in her hand, eyes flickering with concern. "What's going on?" Elias asked, his voice calm but with a note of weariness. "There's been an incident," Tessa replied. "An encrypted transmission from High Command. It was sent under emergency protocol. Elias frowned. What did it say? Tessa glanced down at the pad. It's hard to say. The encryption is dense, but we managed to break through. It's a direct order to initiate a full-scale offensive against a civilian colony in the Farak system. She looked up at him, eyes wide. Captain, this doesn't make sense. There's nothing of strategic value there. Elias' stomach twisted. He had known something like this was coming, but hearing it confirmed was worse than he could have imagined. Civilian casualties, unnecessary destruction, it all pointed to the same thing Riza had said. Someone was pulling the strings behind the scenes, and they weren't concerned with winning the war. They were concerned with control. This is bad, Elias muttered, more to himself than to Tessa. He took a step away from the screen, his gaze drifting toward the far side of the room. Get me a channel to Riza. Tessa hesitated, her expression betraying the internal conflict she was clearly grappling with. Sir, are you sure that's wise? I don't have a choice, Elias interrupted. We need to know what we're dealing with. A moment passed before Tessa gave a stiff nod, her fingers flying over the console. The connection was made. The screen flickered, and Riza's face appeared in front of them, her expression hard as stone, eyes narrow with suspicion. What is it, Captain? She asked, her tone sharp. Elias didn't waste time with pleasantries. There's been a direct order from High Command to target a civilian colony in the Farak system. It's illogical. There's nothing of value there. Riza's gaze flickered briefly with recognition. Firax? She paused, her lips pressing into a thin line. I know that place. Her voice softened slightly. It's a stronghold for a faction of dissenters. They've been rallying against the war, speaking out about the true nature of the conflict. Elias' heart sank. A civilian colony filled with those who questioned the war. This wasn't just about conquest. It was about silencing the truth. What do you know about them? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. They don't have an army, Riza replied, her voice calm, but heavy with the weight of experience. But they've been spreading information, dangerous information. Information that could undermine everything the war is built on. That's why they're being targeted. Elias' jaw clenched. Who's behind this, Riza? Who's giving the orders to wipe them out? Riza's eyes flickered with something, doubt maybe, or perhaps frustration. I don't know for certain, but I have a theory. There's a group of high-ranking officials within the coalition, people who stand to benefit from keeping the war alive. They've been manipulating both sides to ensure the conflict continues. They control the narrative, Captain. We need to stop them, Elias said, more to himself than anyone else. We need to expose this before it's too late. Riza's eyes softened, just a fraction. You're starting to see it, aren't you? But be careful, Captain. If you go after them, you'll be a target. You'll be risking everything. He didn't hesitate. I'd rather risk everything than live in the dark any longer. Riza's gaze hardened, but there was a flicker of respect in her eyes. Then we do this together, Captain. We find the truth, and we bring down those who are making us all fight. Elias nodded, determination settling into his chest. Prepare yourself, Riza. We're going to war. But this time, it's not for survival. It's for the truth. The channel went silent, and Elias stood alone in the dim light of the command center. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, but he didn't look back. Not now. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Elias felt something that had been missing for far too long. Hope. The Farak system loomed on the view screen, a quiet beacon against the vastness of space. Captain Elias Vance stood at the center of the bridge, his expression tense, his eyes fixed on the planet below. The information Riza had given him weighed heavily in his chest, threatening to crush him under its enormity. High Command had ordered the destruction of a civilian colony, but now the stakes had grown even higher. It was no longer just about stopping a rogue faction. It was about shattering the lies that had fueled the war for years. He glanced over at Riza, standing near the console, her sharp eyes scanning the data that flickered across the screen. The uneasy alliance between them had become something deeper, something born of necessity and shared purpose. Riza's expertise with the auxiliary forces, her knowledge of their tactics, had become invaluable. And yet, beneath it all, Elias knew that neither of them was truly safe. They were both playing a dangerous game, and the line between ally and enemy could shift in an instant. Everything's in place, Riza said, her voice calm, but there was a tension in her posture. The message is set to broadcast as soon as we get in range, but we need to be quick. Elias nodded, gripping the edge of the command console as his mind raced. The truth they were about to expose would change everything. The soldiers, the officers, and even the civilians would know what had been done in their name, and that kind of revelation didn't come without consequences. Once we start this, Elias said quietly, there's no going back. I know, Riza replied, her eyes narrowing as she met his gaze, but it's already too late to stop. You've seen the signs, Captain. You know what we're up against. Elias clenched his jaw, the weight of her words settling into his bones. I do, he muttered, his voice low. He thought of the civilians in the Firax system, the families who had been dragged into this conflict because of lies that had been fed to them for years. We're risking everything. And what choice do we have? Riza's voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of emotion. We've both lost too much already. It's time to expose them. As the warship neared the Firax system, the tension in the air grew palpable. The ship's crew moved in a flurry of activity, their eyes trained on their consoles, checking systems, preparing for the unknown. Lieutenant Tessa Miller was at her station, her face pale with anxiety. She wasn't used to operating on this kind of razor-thin margin, but there was no turning back. Captain, Tessa called out, her voice tight. We got incoming Solari fighters. It looks like they picked up on our presence. Elias' heart raced. The Solari were relentless, and if they were coming for them, it was only a matter of time before all hell broke loose. But he didn't hesitate. They couldn't afford to be caught. They couldn't afford to fail. Riza, he said quickly, turning to her. We need to keep them off our backs while we broadcast the message. Can you handle it? Her gaze hardened, determination flaring in her eyes. Leave it to me. Without another word, she was gone, moving swiftly through the corridors toward the ship's combat deck. Elias turned back to the view screen, watching as the Solari ships drew closer, their sleek forms cutting through the stars with terrifying speed. Captain, we're losing power to the main engines, Tessa called, her voice cracking slightly under the pressure. We won't make it to the planet in time if we don't. Elias cut her off, his voice sharp. Divert all remaining power to the engines. We need to get closer. A pulse of red light from the console signaled that they were almost at the edge of the planet's atmosphere. The ships would be on them in moments, but this was the moment. The choice had been made. There was no turning back. Ready the message, Elias ordered, his voice grim. Tessa nodded, her fingers flying over the console. Message queued. It's ready to send on your command. Just as the first Solari fighters appeared on the radar, Riza's voice crackled over the comms. We're in position. I've got them distracted, but we don't have much time. Do it now. Elias didn't hesitate. His finger slammed down on the button, sending the broadcast across the system. The truth would now echo through the stars. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then came the deafening sound of incoming fire. The warship shuddered violently as the Solari ships unleashed their fury. The battle had begun. Hold on, Elias shouted as the ship's hull groaned under the strain. But he didn't flinch. He was no longer just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something much bigger than that. The truth. The warship shuddered again, but Elias remained resolute. The message had been sent, and with it, everything had changed.